Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please subscribe, like, share, make a comment. We really love your comments. I will answer every one of them. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to ask. That's what makes the world go round, is the curiosity of connection. So please do make a comment. And by the way, visit planetarycitizens.net. And there you can get a free copy of my 43rd book that goes along with Planetary Citizens. And it's called Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity. It's a free download. You don't even have to put in any information. You can just click and download it. So it's completely safe. So make a trip to planetarycitizens.net and get your free book too. Now, this week's guest is a really interesting gentleman that I have a lot of synchronicities with already. Why is that? Because the last hyphenation of his name is my given first name, and that would be Bruce. Now, Zen, I got years later, so maybe you'll find out how that happened by doing a little research. So this week's guest is Quinn Stainfield Bruce. He is a co-founder of Humanness, which services high-performing teams to move from unconscious excellence to conscious coherence. Perfect word we're going to talk about later. He's into neuroscience and energy. He looks at the results of these shifts, upgrading 23% in productivity and a 43% reduction in turnover. So it's really practical, right? He's also the host of Learning How to Live. And he says, I believe the future of business lies in embracing what it means to be human. I would say it doesn't lie. It's truthful that embracing what it is to be human is our next evolutionary leap. So with that, I know you're going to enjoy the conversation coming up, so don't go away. We'll be right back. When the world speaks with one voice, love answers. Journey through intimate dialogues that dissolve boundaries and awaken the truth of our shared humanity. One world, uniting voices. Get your copy on Amazon today. Gwen, it is so great to have you, man. I know this is going to be a phenomenal conversation because we speak the same language and maybe we can interpret things for others in the process. Thanks for showing up and being who you are, my brother.
Zen, you're a dude. It's a privilege.
So, we were talking earlier, we're bereft about talking about the inner workings of life, what we go through, what we contemplate. We don't talk to others because we think they're going to think that we're weird or insane or crazy and give us a stiff arm. At least that's what's happened in the past.
Mm.
So the reason I'm doing this is to expose these kind of conversations, show the similarity, and that we're really on the same page in a lot of them. We just use different language. So how did you first begin this journey of your own where you found that interconnectedness, that inner connection? And how did it evolve in your younger life? I know we'll get to the future in a moment, but I want to understand how it first began, if it did, and what kind of events were going on at the time.
Mm. I was a drug addict, I think is a good place to start. And, Carl Jung famously said to one of the original founders of AA, I can't help you or anyone like you. What you need is a spiritual awakening. And so what I had was a spiritual awakening. And I've come to learn that this is, the most essential, the most essential part of human life is to
Absolutely.
connect with our spirituality. And I sum it up incredibly simply for the, I don't know, non-believers. Spirituality is a very simple thing, actually. It
It
is the
is.
paradigm shift from I'm the center of the universe to I am a part of the universe. And in that energetic shift, one can create a crack where suddenly the sensation of needing to control that everything's happening to me, it just cracks open enough that it can be explored. And so that pursuit of being a part of is what spiritual growth is. And that took me on this profound journey of awakening, I guess, which has then, showed me so many places in the world where that restoration of soul is needed, right?
Yes.
Which,
Yes.
ultimately is business that we'll come on to
Absolutely.
talk to
So what
later.
was it like? And what we seek is references, reflections, ways to understand ourselves through our own experience and through others, because there's a bridge there, right? We're not an island. We are part of, as you just said. We're interconnected. Even the quantum sciences now are saying, yeah, it's all energy. I made the mistake of when I was talking to Irvin Laszlo a few years ago. I said, quantum physics has proven we're 99% space and 1% material. And he said, I'd say we're 100% energy.
Mm,
And wow, when I heard those words, the resonance in my being was undeniable. So, how can you refute that when you feel that sense of resonance with a truth? And just as you're saying, the part of, when you release that self identity and you realize that, it's I, we, right? And being able to connect with that, it's an amazing sensation. So, how did that when you first began, what were your key points that you found a shift in from to?
mm. Yeah. Okay. Well, if I go back a little bit, right? So the first 20 years, well, no, the first 34 years of my life were spent in the pursuit of money, property, and prestige, right? I need, in order to feel enough, I need to achieve external material things.
Sure.
And that
Well, that's the
led me,
programming, right? That we all get.
yeah, exactly. And that landed me in rehab ultimately, with all of the successes, right? That best attempt at my life had failed. So I was in a place of surrender where I said, okay, show me how to live. All right. And for me, it was 12-step recovery, right?
Mhm.
That's where I was brought into the concept of a higher power or spiritual principles. I had
It's a great
no
journey for many.
It's incredible. It's
Yeah.
incredible. I had no grounding before. I had no relationship with anything bigger than myself or a higher power. But through 12-step recovery, I was slowly introduced to it, right? And that's where I guess it sort of woke up. But very practically, it was about living by spiritual principles that started changing things. So that I said about that awakening, suddenly everything wasn't happening to me. I saw that being a victim was actually a tool to protect myself from fear. And so in doing the opposite of victimhood,
Right.
right? Being
Well, is it
maybe
more than fear? Is it not only fear, but it's trust?
go on.
Trust in your connection, right? Trust in your availability. We were talking prior to, the awareness that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Well, in that unawareness, we don't accept that we're connected. We feel like we're separate. So we look for outer information, data, people to help us figure out who we are instead of going inside first, asking the questions, and then observing the breadcrumbs that begin to show up for us to follow.
Yes, but this is the criminal things then is that who nobody showed me how to do that, right?
I
Nobody
don't know
showed
that.
my parents how to do that.
Yeah,
But I had to reach, the lowest rock bottom before I was willing to open myself up to a new way of living that eventually
right.
showed me
Well, you
that.
did that though. Here, and this is the key point, right? not everybody is able, right? They get stuck in that, oh, I want to just numb out because it doesn't, nothing feels right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they get stuck there and never ascend.
But even the ones who are uncomfortable, it's not uncomfortable enough to do
Yeah,
anything radical,
right.
right? But this is the thing, is that this ancient practice, I think we are entering a golden age of humanity. I'm one of those people, right?
Well,
I
all the
think
calendars, right? If we can look at the prophecies and the calendars and we think they have any essence of truth, they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah, we could go into that. We could go into the Kabbalistic Messianic age. That's apparently happening right now. You actually only have to look at what's going on in the Middle East at the moment and cross-reference that with Old Testament stuff. But even if you don't want to go that way, and you just want to look at what AI is doing. I mean, AI is
Right.
creating. What are we going to do with ourselves? But be more human. What is the human thing? The
Well, in
human with
AI,
conscious
it's not,
contact.
absolutely, absolutely. This is exciting, right? It's just hard to keep my mouth shut, right? So in AI, we think it's artificial. It's mechanical. However, it's an aggregate of human production.
Can I ask you something, right? Because
Sure.
I said this, I don't know, about a year ago, and nobody really nobody really resonated with it. But I want to see what you think, right?
Okay.
I wrote this thing that said, of course, our egos would create something that it could be God to, right? And like that for me was what AI, like, of course, our ego would want to create something it could be the God to.
Absolutely. Well, we don't recognize that the ego shifts to we go when we begin creating because it's no longer about us, right? That data pool now is that amalgamation, aggregation of the entirety, maybe not the entirety yet, but at least what's accessible and what can be digitized is now so. So these are human contributions, including truths and errors. And this is why, chat says, well, we don't know everything, so check your sources, important
Mm.
stuff. However, we have it now, and it's pushing us because we can ask better questions, we can do more detailed research and then determine whether it's true or not, and have all of these things available. So it's just amazing. I totally agree with you.
The
That
thing
was
is,
the
then, is
beginning
that,
of it.
like, personally, I'm not particularly computer literate, nor am I AI literate. I just know that if this is going to free up time, then there is only one thing we can do with our time, and that is to become more human, which
Right.
means it must be about mass spiritual awakening. It has to be, because what else is there to do?
Right. Well, and there's all kinds of other things if you're looking at it from a personal ego-based, profit over people and planet as opposed to people and planet over profit.
How long for, though? It's not sustainable. Like, everyone
Right.
will go
Well,
mad,
and
and
that's the thing that is showing,
yes,
right?
exactly.
We were talking about I mentioned coherence, right, in your introduction. Um, my latest book coming out on the 20th is Coherence from Hydrogen to Humanity, because we're able to look at the fine detail and really figure out how we're all connected from a science perspective, not just spirituality. So the
Hmm.
two now are saying the same thing, and the quantum sciences is allowing that. It's proving
Hmm.
that what's been said for millennia is actually true, and it gives access to many more people as a result.
Again, I love that Carl Jung quote when asked if, do you believe in God? And he goes, believe? I don't believe. I know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like I am past, I'm past worrying about how well this is received by people, because I just know, like, my journey was one of maybe more traditional spirituality, but the universal truths are the universal truths. And these are just being rolled out by scientific evidence now, left, right, and
Right.
center.
Right.
And it's just a
Which
very
edifies
exciting
this
time.
golden age.
Exactly. It's a
Right.
very exciting
Now,
time
if
to be
there was,
alive.
what do you think about, so, destiny is not necessarily just prophecy because prophecy fulfilled is a choice, right? Undeniable when you reach these kinds of understandings because there's no place else you can go, right? Because none of it feels coherent
Mm,
unless you're doing this work on self, first of all, loving self, the two things we want in life, to love and be loved,
mm,
right? That's the
mm,
essence of our being is love, energy, in other words, unqualified, unconditional, right? We qualify it all by how we think and how we construct our perspectives, which then gives us our perceptions. Now, if we have no perspective, if we just say, oh, I don't know, let's see. And you figure out what questions to ask from there.
Then
So
you'd have to
it,
be very comfortable in not knowing.
oh yeah. And for most humans, that's really tough to do because we're so tied into the knowing and the trusting and the being able to see things and yet all the patterns, disruptive patterns that we see as chaos are simply patterns that we don't understand yet. There are no anomalies in the universe.
But I believe that nothing new really can be created if we're basing it on the known, right? If it's known, then we can tweak, we can evolve, but it's all pre-existing in order to truly, and this is why again I think it'll be a golden age for humanity, because in order to, if we can learn to be able to surrender to the unknown totally, then we are opening ourselves up for innovation on a scale that we've never even seen. And I'm
Right.
not talking just about AI here. I'm talking about imagine humans en masse being able to sit into faith, right? And again, it doesn't need to be religious faith, it could just be that space of conscious contact where one does not need to know where the universe is doing its thing and then allow for ideas to emerge. Like for
Sure.
me, I'm like I love Kabbalah, and the Kabbalistic way of looking at the creation was
Sure.
it was born out of nothing. So you have the Kabbalistic tree of life, and the first part of it, which is called Shakma, is about it's about conception, and it's a spark. It's out of nothing, and
Right.
the story goes that when life when consciousness was created and it was given everything, it refused it because it meant nothing to have just been given the light. It needed to refuse it, and in that split, right, that split is what would be called the Big Bang, right? But it's that birth from nothing, and I feel that as a species, if we all become conscious, and I'm not talking, doesn't need to be religious or woo woo or whatever. I'm just talking conscious.
Yeah.
The ability to then innovate from that place. The great thing is, Zen, is that we don't know what that will look like. And that's the thing. We have to be comfortable with not knowing. But it's in the not knowing that the
Well, and
new
it
things
defies the
happen.
old, right, the old entrepreneurial things. Begin with the vision, right? Begin with the end in mind. Well, what is that? Um, what does in a new world order, as I was told, I'm here to help facilitate, that meant harmony among people and planet, right?
You said it earlier. Love, right? Like what's the North Star, right? Not the vision. What is the it's love, right? So if we are innovating from a place of love, create then we're not going to regret it, right? Whatever it is,
Right. It
But
may not be easy. It may be uncomfortable here and there. Well, it's designed to be because we have to grow and we can't grow if we're not uncomfortable, right? But then how do you turn that uncomfort into comfort and step into that chaos with the knowing that it'll all work out. You just have to be in that precious present.
Yeah, which is for me faith.
Yeah.
All right. Because if I'm in fear, it means I'm not in faith. And this is again where my the thing is, this is where my spirituality comes into it. And I could call it anything. If I'm in fear, it means that I think I have to, I know best. First of all, I'm thinking I know best. That's
Hmm.
what fear means, which then means that I think I know the workings of the entire universe,
Right.
right?
Isn't
Which
that
I
a
can't
little
possibly.
pompous? Right?
Right? Fear is actually in effect pompous. Like that's what
Sure.
it is, right? But if I'm in faith, which is that again in Kabbalah it would be all's for the good. But you
Hmm.
could look at it from a Taoist place, which is also I don't know what good or bad is. This might be good, it might be bad. I don't know because right now, like, do you know the story of the Taoist farmer? You must have heard this one about. Do you know it? Should I paraphrase it?
I know many stories. Are you talking about the diamonds?
No, I'm talking about the
Okay.
one. So there's a Taoist farmer, and he has a horse, a beautiful horse, and his neighbor looks over the fence and says, "Your horse is incredible. You're so lucky." And he says, "Maybe." The next day, the horse runs away, and the neighbor says, "Oh, you're so unlucky." And he says, "Maybe."
Maybe.
And then the horse returns the next day with seven wild horses, and the neighbor says, "Oh, you're so lucky." He says, "Maybe." The next day, his son is breaking in one of the horses, falls, breaks his leg. You're so unlucky. Maybe. And then the next day, the army come to conscript soldiers and they have to pass over the boy because his leg's broken. And the neighbor says, "Oh, you're so lucky." He says, "Maybe." This is, the Taoist principle of I don't know what's good or bad,
Well,
right?
exactly. It's a Zen thing, right? It's just what is, and there's no
Yeah.
emotional attachment to it whatsoever.
Yes,
That's a
yes,
tough
exactly.
place to get, and there's a couple of things with the Kabbalah and the Taoist things. The first with the Taoist, as far as the three brain system, the indigenous philosophy of the gut being the first brain, the heart being the second brain, the head being the third brain, and processing things in that way. And it even makes more sense today because of quantum physics
Mm,
and the neurosensors in the gut, right? You tune into the vibrations first and then you distill it. You go into the heart, the Taoist, is this desirable or undesirable? Right? Maybe. Right. And
mm,
then you feed the head in that quantum computer that's multidimensional, which then gives you good feedback and
mm,
choices. Then with the Kabbalah, the 72 names, right? The
mm.
36 greater, 36 lesser. And we don't realize that they're both leading us to the one. One gives us the memo, the other tests it to see if we got the message,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
right?
so cool.
And so that's that almost, it's not a it's a full commitment, right? Of just being still, asking the questions, and watching what unfolds, and then participating as it does, as you're called to do. Now, as your calling took place, what was that feeling? What was if you could describe it from an intimate, internal processing, conflagration, if you will, what was that like?
According to what I do today.
Yeah, because it led
Mm,
you into this phenomenal opportunity that you provide for others to experience their truth. Because we can't, beliefs, books, tapes, movies, whatever, those are all extrapolated truths, possibly. Our only truth comes from a direct experience.
mm, mm. Yeah. Okay. So I spent, as I said, 20 years in advertising,
Hmm.
the belly of the beast, really. And
Sure.
and and
The
and and,
Ogilvy
and
guys all the way, right?
yes. And the pursuit of more in that world landed me in, like I said, in rehab. So my best attempt at life had failed, is the way that sort of I arrived. So in uncovering my inner purpose, which is funny what you said earlier, my inner purpose is to love and be loved, right? To give and receive love,
Mhm.
from that higher level of consciousness, the more unconditional
That's the
space.
one. expressed in many and shared.
And so my outer purpose, how that manifests, how can I give that to the world? I used a little formula, which I think was a Carnegie formula, which is something like passion plus talent times associations times action. So my passion was helping people. That was a passion, and especially in 12-step recovery, where you learn to be of
Hmm.
service. It's like to be of service. There is no more esteemable act than to be of service to others.
Absolutely.
You
Well,
know,
law of one
from
says, there's service to self and service to others. Well, why do you have to be bipolar about it? The best service to self is service to others.
Exactly. The most, for a man who never had self-esteem, a lot of arrogance, right, but no self-esteem, to learn self-esteem through being of service, it's a powerful thing. So my passion was being of service, right? My talents was that I guess in this instance, we had been using ancient human ceremony in advertising. Forgive me, but we used it to help brands and their agencies create coherence for the brand positioning, for its
Right.
communication.
Right.
And it was very powerful. It resulted in tears, emotional coherence. It was an unbelievably powerful process. And I said to myself, this has to be for more. I can't,
Hmm.
this isn't just about selling more product. That I don't necessarily care about selling more product. I do care passionately about the human beings who do.
Sure.
So, so we took these ancient human ceremonies that were having a profound impact on people. Because you touched on it a little earlier, it's the experience. We found a way of unapologetically giving people a spiritual experience, whether they want to call it that or not. The neuroscience is that we move people from high beta brainwave to alpha and theta. That's what we do, pretty
Hmm.
unapologetically. In doing so, people go from fear to a place of creativity and flow, which opens them up to be
Right.
able
It's a
to
different kinds of
engage.
entrainment.
Correct. Correct. So I suppose what your question was, like, what was it feel like inside of me? I I don't really share this with many people, but there was a point in my early recovery where life was good. I was clean, I had money in the bank, the sun was shining, I was driving somewhere, and I had this existential feeling of, is this it? And
Hmm.
I was like, I wanted to drive the car into a tree, and it was just like this existential moment of, if this is all life is, like, I'm done. And it was in that moment I was like, the calling of bringing, restoring soul. There are so many people in the world who are working with leaders and individuals and CEOs to help them attain consciousness or to become better leaders. But nobody had figured out a way to actually look at an organization as an organism and bring
Right.
consciousness to the organization.
Sure. Well, it's a
Uh,
holistic system, whether we see it as such or not. All the parts have an effect on the whole, and we aren't able to break it down to explode it into the various pieces and then reassemble it differently.
yes, yes. What we feel we've uncovered is by revealing what's already there, right? The
Oh,
spiritual
now we're having
print.
an apocalyptic moment.
But this is, and it was, yeah, this was brought to someone brought this, showed me that this is what we were doing recently.
Uh-huh.
It's not that we're restoring spiritual principles to business operations. They're already there because an organization is made up of human beings who work there. So they're already all business is already spiritual. That's the thing. They're just covered and in layers of masks
Sure.
and
Yeah.
other stuff. But what we can do is reveal what's already there, which is at the core love. Okay, that's what's at the core. And create you allow that to reemerge within teams, within business units. You can't really go back from an awakening.
No. Now, do you find? And that's absolutely true because, once the paste's out of the tube, you can't put it back in. It's just impossible, right? And if you
We've
try
tried,
to,
maybe.
well, you can try, but you'll end up defeating yourself and ha causing all kinds of extra problems that you never wanted, right? Because you're resisting, right? You're resisting the natural order. And I think that's maybe what we've been doing for too long is
Hmm.
resisting natural order because natural order is in harmony. Doesn't, it's how we see it. And even with nature, we see the destructive capacity of it and we think that things need to be destroyed in order to recreate. That's not necessarily true, right? That's just one aspect, one pattern in the overall picture. How did you find that in that awakening from the existential to the, okay, I got to serve and I can do it this way? Um, I found that there's three elements of that where you put your attention, your intention, and your interaction. And that comes from the inspiration that you have to move. You take your skill set, your talent, and you apply it, right?
Mm.
How did that process evolve and what were the things that you noticed that weren't necessarily missing that needed nudging into unveiling in the awareness process?
Hmm. The disease of addiction is a spiritual disease, as I mentioned earlier, right?
Hmm.
And so, what is a spiritual disease? It's one of self-centered fear. What is the antidote? Selflessness, right? I am a part of, I am not the center of. What
Yeah.
I realized in working,
Selfishly selfless, right?
correct, what I realized in working through 12-step recovery and going through a profound radical transformation. I was a drug addict, right? That's where I was. And uh, today I am the man that I am, which is living a life beyond my wildest dreams and with joy and happiness and fulfillment and purpose in all of its ways.
Hmm.
So I know what radical transformation of a human being looks like because I lived it, and then I take countless people through it in 12-step recovery. But what I realized was that this disease of addiction was that work is addicted. Work is
Oh,
addicted to
yeah.
shareholder return. It's addicted to growth. Now, how do you create, what environment does an organization have to create in order to have people pursuing growth at all costs? There's only one, and it's fear, right? It's only through fear and lack and comparison and less than and need and greed that you can create an environment where growth at all costs is the modus operandi.
Right.
And it occurred to me that this self-centered disease was as rife in the world of business as anywhere. Now, if 12-step recovery can radically transform human beings in a way that I have never seen anything else do, certainly when it comes to addiction, there is
Hmm.
nothing as profoundly impactful as 12-step recovery. I'm not saying that other things don't work. I'm just saying there's nothing I've seen impact millions and millions of people.
Sure.
Then surely it could be applied to business, right? And that's basically what I did.
And obviously with the 23%, upgrade in profitability and 43% turnover reduction, that's huge. Now, let's take it to another level, right? B Corps and
Hmm.
that ilk, right? Where the mission to serve is built in. Do you see, and the serve being people and planet as opposed to profit, right? You still have to have profit
Hmm.
because
I love
it
profit.
has to work that way,
Yeah.
at least for now. But do you see the opportunity of and or the shifting of old paradigms of organizations and companies that have the people or the profit over people and planet thought form, if you will, right? That's their operation because their products don't necessarily benefit mankind. They're just consumer items and they destroy the environment and others in the process of the production, right? We don't take that in consideration yet. We're starting to, in my opinion. Now, do you see the evolution of business as we know it and organizations falling apart as a result in this shift toward people and planet over profit?
Hmm. Consciousness, then.
Hmm.
For me, what's consciousness? Consciousness is being awake, awake to truth. What is truth? Love, right? If we are conducting ourselves from a place of love, we're not going to go too far wrong. I don't know too much about business operations. I don't really know the answers to most questions. Look, I come from a mindset of abundance. I love profit and growth. I think
Hmm.
life's purpose is emergence, is more.
Well,
The
even
acorn into the oak
Jesus said to
tree.
have life and more abundantly, right? And
Exactly.
we thought that meant worldly goods, but at the same time, yes, those are included. However,
Maybe it does mean worldly goods. For me, it's the acorn into the oak tree. And when the oak tree becomes huge, it doesn't stop producing. It doesn't
no,
stop giving. If we are in an infinitely abundant universe, then this lack mindset. I'm not sure whether I totally align to. If we are in a truly abundant universe, for me, it's the intention, right? Like, is it from a place of love? Now, I learned
mhm,
this the hard way certainly in 12-step
most of us
recovery.
do,
We all do, right?
right?
But what's the difference between lust and love as a spiritual principle? Lust, nothing wrong with healthy lust, but lust is a selfish desire for sex, right? That's what we say in recovery, right? If
Sure.
I'm acting in lust, I'm acting from a selfish place. I want to change how I feel by using you. Love, however, right? Love is coming from a place of not lack, of not needing, right? But of wanting to come from that place of love. Now,
Right.
if it doesn't, for me, whether it's a B Corp or a multinational, or like, I want to be working with big oil and tobacco, because I want to work everywhere there's humans, because I want people to be working from a place of love, of truth, of vulnerability. At which point, and this goes back to my answer to your question, with consciousness, one cannot act from a dysfunctional place. Not like they can, but like you say, you're going against the nature of things, and it's very hard,
Right.
right? And so,
Well,
but
we've
if one,
learned how to push through, right? And
yeah,
our lives are about pushing and pulling energy.
where
And
does that get us?
exactly, that's a collapsed culture, right? The
I mean,
co-creative
literally the
culture.
term burnout, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And why does that happen? Because we become exhausted of resources internally. So how
Mm.
do you refill that? Well,
I think I think you're like this, right? So at Humanness, we have we believe in two energy sources within an organization. One is the mythology of the founders. All
hmm,
right. When an organization
sure.
was founded, didn't matter, doesn't matter
The
how big,
vision,
the vision,
which equates to the mythology.
but the source energy that sparked the idea in the first place.
Yeah.
Like nobody's launched a business, came up with a new idea with the purpose being shareholder return, right? It didn't that was not the inception point. There was a spark, like the
Right.
spark of an embryo
Problem solution, right?
fertilizing, right? Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Now that mythology, if tapped into, is an infinite source of energy, right? If every person in that organization can tap into the mythology of that organization and feel the purpose, that is an infinite source of energy. The other
Hmm.
one is the individual's hero's journey. So we believe passionately in Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and being able to understand one's own adventure and what made us the people we are. Right,
Yeah.
you told your story to me before, a beautiful story, and we go through the suffering we go through, and it forms us into the heroes, and then we face dragons that we slay, and under the dragon is treasure, and we bring that treasure back home, and these, each of us has this. Now when we can tap into that, and we can align the values that are born out of our journey, the things that we really care about, love. Love, what it means to me, was born out of my journey, my hero's journey. And if I can attach that or overlap it or find coherence with the mythology of the organization I work in, this is nuclear, right? This is powerful, powerful stuff.
Absolutely.
And what happens from a healthy, functioning ecosystem? It grows.
Abundance.
Abundance. You want
Yeah.
shareholder return, get the ecosystem
I
healthy,
know.
because
I
it's all
know.
it can
Yeah,
do.
yeah. You mentioned Joseph. I watched the whole series with Bill Moyers
Mm.
when it first came out. Just really spoke to me. And then a few years later, I got the opportunity to produce and host a TV show called One World, which is the predecessor to this. 1990 it was. And
I'm
I
so in
wanted to.
awe that you are of how ahead of the time you were.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I disruptor, and it was all in love, right? I wanted to talk to people about how they got through life, what prompted them to do what they're doing from both inner and outer perspectives, and what fears they encountered, how they overcame them, and how they saw that fitting into the common human experience. Kind of the same thing we're talking about, but there's 30 years difference and a little better wisdom in the process, better ability to ask questions, right? And so I wanted to emulate Bill Moyers and Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, hoping someday to be worthy of an interview with one of them. Now, that was in
Mm.
1990. Here's the magic of coherence. I didn't think anything more about it. I just went on with my life. We ended up producing 120 plus shows, and then I did another short term, and then I dropped it for a while. Then in 2018, I'm running a ufology press website, and Jeffrey reaches out to me through it. I had a snake pipe feature, only, web-based voicemail. Only thing I had for connection, hadn't had one in 8 years. I get a voicemail message from him. I recognize his voice. My heart starts pitter-patting, right? And he reaches out to me for another interview that he did, hoping that I would promote it because my audience might enjoy it. Watched it, wrote an article, sent a link to him, and a copy of my big book, which is called Stubbing My Toe on Purpose. And it was 1,000 pages to begin with. I brought it down to 500 so I could publish it hard copy on Amazon. So I sent that to him. And 3 days later, got an email back. Hey, would you like to come talk about it? So that was a 28-year dream come
Yeah,
true, right? And we
yeah.
didn't just do one show, we did three. And so, how edifying is that as far as personal credibility and feeling like, oh, I made it, right? Um, Even though it was temporary, right? There was still that acknowledgement of the universe or creation or reality or whatever you want to call it. I have trouble with labels because as soon as you put a label on something, you diminish its capacity.
Yeah.
However, because of what is, things evolve. Now, that's just one example, right? My life's
It's
been
insanely
filled with
cool.
those kinds of things, as I'm sure yours has too. Because why? Because we pay attention, we have intention, and the interactions that back it up. It's all aligned. It may be not completely aligned, it's enough so that we can learn how to work out the rough edges.
It's comfortable in not knowing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, in that
Learning.
experience, for you, how did that come into the process of working with the organizations and how that the incremental steps that you went through in inspiration, inception, conception, and delivery?
Right. Yeah. We had to give people the opportunity to taste the magic, as
Mm.
you can imagine. Right? If you want to walk into a multinational organization talking the way we talk and expect, I mean, it's, good
Well, yeah, it's a
luck.
different language, and that's the thing that you knew well. If I just want to offer this in your own and acknowledging the knowledge you had going in, coming out of advertising, you got to speak to your audience in their language first before you can take them anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But I realized that they had to experience it. This is something you said earlier. If you have to experience, we call it tasting the chocolate. It's like, I could, if you've never tasted chocolate, I could give you 1,000-page book on what chocolate tastes like. But if until you've tasted it, you don't know.
Right.
So the first thing we realized we had to do was create an experience that people could have.
It has to
Because
be
once
visceral.
once they've experienced it, the belief emerges. It's like, oh
Mhm.
wow. They don't need to then know what happens afterwards. They just know that this is definitely going to deliver something different,
Yeah.
you know? And the program itself, like I said, was formulated in its own way out of, for me, 12-step recovery. It's 5 phases. So phase one, acknowledge the problem. So we use our humanness energy assessment. We
Oh, yeah. You got to talk
measure.
about the elephant in the room.
Exactly. We measure the incoherence, right? Where are the energetic blocks? And we do it it's very efficient. Every time people see it, it blows their minds. So
Hmm.
then they can say, well, what would it be like if we unblocked these elements? All right. Would that be worth changing? And at which point, most people will say, yeah, let's commit to doing that. So
Absolutely.
the
Right.
next phase is uncovering the mythology, like we spoke about earlier.
Hmm.
Next, phase three, the hero's journey. So people being taken on an experience to unlock their own journeys. Then phase four, creating coherence between the two, using ancient ceremony, ritual, all anchored in neuroscience. But these are ancient human practices, right? That we didn't invent. They've been there for millennia, right?
Right.
We just bring them in. We just unapologetically bring them into business, right? And then the final phase is action. So taking that energy and then landing it into
Hmm.
execution. In Kabbalah, it's referred to as dat, but it's the third part of the Kabbalistic tree of life.
I
It's
am that.
perception, comprehension, perception, landing it, right? And so this is where, and it's a very innovative place where teams start applying it to their day to day. I mean, I saw a sales team, a sales team on this journey collectively tell their leaders, we want to work on shared commission, right? This is now, after having gone through the process, they tell their leaders, we want to work by shared commission because that's how they work from a place of togetherness. That's how they work from a place of belonging. Now, I worked in software sales for a while. The idea that a sales team go, we want to share is unheard of, right?
Right.
But I watched a sales team just come online, just consciousness, just go, we're in this together. That's what this is, and it was just beautiful. It was like that.
Oh,
It was.
yeah. Well, considering, internally when you're in competition with your neighbor or your coworker, you're not, that's not the mission.
It's the opposite.
Right.
It's the opposite. What is the opposite of love? And oneness. It's separateness. How does, the opposite of love being hate? What is hate? Othering. It's like I need to be separate in order to justify my own selfish survival.
Right.
It's all.
Isn't it just so absurd, right? When we begin to look at things through this lens. Now, granted, it's a different perspective that manages our perception now, because perspective controls your perception. You can't do anything else. You're not going to have a perception without first having a belief system as your perspective. Now, what happens when you suspend that belief system. How do you do that?
But this is the ego doesn't want to let anyone do that. It's because it's unknown. It means stepping away from the warmth and the safety of the campfire into the darkness, right? And to take that leap, you need faith, right? But faith to the layman is almost about it's a feeling of safety. It's a feeling of trust. How do you bring that to business? If you can create an environment where people are truly willing to be honest, not just with what's in their head, but what's in their hearts, if they're
Right.
willing to be self-honest and then to share that honesty vulnerably with one another, and for
That's the
that
word. You
to
become
be,
vulnerable,
yeah, because
right? There's
build
strength in that.
you can't build trust without it. You
Yeah.
just can't. You can't build trust without honest vulnerability. So what it's through that fragility that you build the strength. And it's like I'm going to put myself out there, and if it's held and then reciprocated, you build strong foundations. Now you build foundations where people feel genuinely safe, not this, buzzword of psychological safety or, I'm
Intellectual
talking where
humility and all that kind of stuff, right?
I'm talking genuinely you feel
Right.
safe and held, then you will have a form of faith, even if it's just in the
I'm,
team.
I'm laughing because my dad used to tell me, a good politician can tell somebody to go to hell and get them to enjoy the journey.
Yes, and that is what happens at work. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. Like this is what we signed up for. But that's what I did, and it killed me. You know,
Well, it depletes energy instead of edify it, right? And it takes us a while, sometimes lifetimes, to recognize that. And with all of those um, collected lifetimes here now with 8 billion people, we've got a major challenge. Do you see this effective growth, this understanding, this new paradigm apocalypse affecting the world in short or long term fashion? Do you think that there is enough momentum that we can move through in the next 5 years, let's say, this notion of borders and separation and get to the place that Don Keyes went to back in the 70s, which is what Planetary Citizens is based off of, a borderless world where we have shared responsibilities.
Mhm. Oneness
Yeah.
is the truth, right? I don't know how long that's going to take. I have no idea, but that is the destination.
Well, and all the prophecies, all the calendars, all the things talk about this reality coming to pass eventually.
Everything, yeah, everything. All I can say is that there is mass awakening happening. Like, so I adore David R. Hawkins, and who I'm sure you probably do as
I
well.
know him personally, knew him.
You are like even the fact that you just knew him is like
Oh,
rock
he lived
star
just north
status
of
for
me. And
me.
when I had a good friend that was his presentation coordinator.
Yeah,
Right. That's just some of the amazing ancillary connections that I've had in life and showing up certain places have just proven amazing. Another one was Edgar Mitchell, which is kind of why I use this photo from the moon. He had, I befriended him at a prophets conference that I was producing. I got hired to do all the logistics. We had about 5,000 people over the weekend and about 35, 40 speakers, something like that. Edgar was one of them. And I befriended him. We had a great conversations, and we started with tobacco and then escalated from there. And he says to me, I want to tell you something, but you got to promise not to tell anybody till after I'm dead.
Okay.
Now, what do you do with that? So he says,
Yes, no problem.
yeah, and I'm a man of my word, right? When I commit to something, I can maintain. So he says, when we left the command module, because he was the pilot of the lunar excursion module, all the way down to the surface of the moon, there was a metallic silver cylinder spiraling around them. He said, didn't know whether it was piloted, couldn't tell the size because of the small window and no perspective. I can say that it was nothing from Earth. So that just went into a domino. I'd heard the story of the moon being a transport escape pod from a planet called Maldek, which is now our asteroid belt, where that civilization had tried to build the pyramids here and send electromagnetic energy back to their planet because they were running out of energy and their calculations were off. And there was another more advanced race that was watching that had this capacity to create the moon and did so, extricated those that were of our ilk, basically, and then moved them over here. And they'd been there for millions of years while our society developed, and they've been watching. Well, most of it, and I'm sure you mentioned Axel earlier and the things that he's into, all the messages from anywhere off planet is, hey, you guys need to learn how to get along. Until you do, we can't help. We can only give advice.
Yeah. And, and like I said, my business partner, Axel, would have a lot of opinions around that. But back to the rock star element of you knowing David R. Hawkins, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, like that guy, like
I'm,
wow. I'm honestly, I'm starstruck, and it's just, you knew him. His, he talked about how the global level of consciousness at the time of, say, Jesus was
mhm.
at a certain point, and how it had been exponentially, like it had leapt to like 100 points. It was still in that transcending point between the lower levels and the higher levels, between
Right.
sort of base animal desire and, and a higher level of consciousness.
Well, but it shows you how one with the 900 level ish or almost 1,000 level, right, can affect the rest.
Correct. But what I'm saying is that what's happening now in the last year, 3 years, like you said earlier, since COVID, globally is palpable. Therefore, if the shift is that significant in consciousness, then I would say, like, hold on to your potatoes, Dr. Jones, because
Right.
this is like this is intense.
Yeah.
Like I feel the intensity. Like it's just like if you like there is no choice but to become the willow, to use a Zen
Sure.
analogy,
Sure.
right? There is no choice but to be able to move, because it's too much otherwise. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
it's exciting.
Now that's the intensity of the energy, right? Speaking of energy, when you're inside, that sensation that you have, that energy that's wanting to emerge, is there a sound with it too? Is there a high-pitched, effervescent, iridescent sensation along with it?
I haven't experienced that myself. For me, but my practice with feeling the energy is rooted in Kundalini and Tantra, right?
My
So,
wife's a Kundalini yoga teacher.
lucky
I
man,
met her at her graduation of all things. And she's originally from the USSR. She was trained as a piano pedagogue.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Well, but so for me, that's my experience of the energy. And in meditation, I'm practicing more and more the ability to be able to move it up through my body
Right.
and retain it in the upper chakras. But it's a very visceral feeling. And sometimes
Sure.
it
Yeah.
causes
Not always,
almost
but you can tap
shaky.
into it. It depends on how preoccupied you are.
Yes, but which again is the practice of meditation for me,
Right.
is to try and be less preoccupied. But the
Sure.
thing is that, but I'm quite a civilian in some respects, right? Because I subscribe to everything, but at the same time, I think it's one of my gifts is that I can walk with the unconscious and the conscious. I can wear
Your
both
bridge,
hats. Yeah, I'm a bridge, right? Like
right?
that came to me in an Akashic Records meditation, actually, that's what I am, right? It's interestingly. And but for me, everything I've explored all leads to that one truth, right? Of oneness, right? The experiences. Look at the Old Testament, the way it talks about the angels, and then talk about how people talk about light beings. Like it's the for me, I don't
Ezekiel's
like.
wheel, for instance, right? If that not isn't a description of a celestial ship, right?
Exactly, but I don't need to know definitively. I could because, as Carl Jung said, it's like I don't believe I know. It's like I don't like I don't need that. I don't need definitiveness.
Right.
I can tune in. And actually I can tune in whether I'm, doing whether it's Kabbalah or the Vedic texts. Like for me, like there and I was talking to a guy who knew his Judaism, and he was saying, well, there's a part in the Abrahamic where they talk about Abraham's sons going to the east carrying gifts, and how some of the Vedic stuff came from this, and how it's all intertwined. I'm like,
It
cool.
is. Right. And then you got Melchizedek showing up with no beginning of days and no ending of days and saying, okay, here's how it works, folks.
Yeah, and have
Right.
you ever cross-referenced?
Right.
Have you ever cross-referenced the teachings of the Buddha and a lot of what Jesus said? There is
Well, it's the same truth. It's the oneness. It's the
the same
one
truth.
that flows through many, and it's spoken slightly differently because we have slightly different frequencies. We're going to express a little differently.
Exactly. It's like in 12-step recovery, there's tradition 4, which says all meetings need to be autonomous. Now, why do all meetings need to be autonomous? Because different meetings are going to appeal to different people,
Mhm.
right? The message is the same, right? The
Right.
principles are the same, but they need
Yeah,
to
it just
be
depends
able
on
to
where
be
you're listening
received.
or experiencing it from in your own personal life as to, and again, this is energy, this is magnetism, this is harmonics, right? You're going to be
Yes, yes,
attracted to where you need to be when you allow yourself that
yes,
freedom.
yes.
And oftentimes, maybe you can validate this when you're wondering, right? When you're in when you're in inquiry, something comes up that moves you, literally moves you toward something that may not understand why or how doesn't diminish the fact that your experience of it. Now, in that, what happens? What did you notice as a perfect example of that? Because I know when I was talking about it, you probably had something come up. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that, right?
Like,
The
sorry,
experience of that inspiration and how the breadcrumbs showed up and how you followed it unbeknownst to begin with, right? Where you just had the curiosity and then it had its own
it came
process of
pretty hard
manifestation.
and fast. My
Yeah.
downloads come in the morning always, between like 3 and 5 a.m., unfortunately. And they just come.
Hey, I'm up at 3:30 every morning where I want to be or not. My body just does that.
I know, right? It's a pain in the ass. But
Yeah.
it's but yeah, it just lands hard, and I get very, very excited. And it's how we're all I'm pretty useless after about midday, generally speaking. But the
Well,
hours
yeah,
between like 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. magic happens for me,
sure. Well, you're in
and
tune. This is where, like to say, the ultimate meditation time is between 3 and 5. Why is that? Because the people in your area are probably asleep and there's less psychic disturbance because we are
mm,
interconnected, right? We
interesting.
pick up
Yeah.
on that, those thoughts that are projected. whether they recognize it or not, because telepathy has no limits. It's just out there. It's how we tune in that makes the difference. And
Yeah,
sometimes we have a pretty wide bandwidth that we're able to listen to. That can be real confusing.
yeah, yeah. My fiance is a shamanic, is a shamanic practitioner, so a Native American practicing, and and she's a big believer in that t telepathy's coming.
Sure, sure. Well, the natives use it, Filipinos used it during World War II to avoid the military, psychic surgeons, all that kind of stuff. Um, again, it's back to that third brain or three brain, the gut, the heart, and the head. When you feel
This
with your
is what
gut,
it's
we get
about, though.
moved.
Zen. This is like the normalization, right, of human experience. This is really what it's about.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where we're moving to. The so-called age of enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. We disassociated ourselves from our source, our energy, who we really are. I mean, we've been heading that way for a long time. We
Hmm.
lost the divine feminine a long, long, long time ago, and it's time to remember. That's all, right? It's time to
Perfect.
remember.
Perfect. Because it's a remembering. It's not a guilt trip because we didn't get it, right? Because this is all, if you look at the timeline for planetary civilizations, evolution, this is just what happens,
Mm,
right? It's all part of the process. There's no good or bad in it. There's
mm,
simply the process, and we
mm,
do our best with what we have.
mm, mm.
And collectively, the bar gets raised, right? So, like with the Mayan calendar and the whole 2012 thing, right? The Jose Arguelles was a personal friend as well.
I
And I,
bet.
I met him at the same event that I met Edgar Mitchell. So, and we maintained communication for up until his death. So his thing about the calendar was, the increase of awareness and consciousness escalated near to the point of a vertical, like the information curve, right? Up to 2012. So that solstice, the apex was, okay, now we got it. It's embedded. Now what? Right? Now that we've got that connection, our vibrations changed. Our planet and our solar system is now in a new area of space that they call the photon belt, which has a slightly different, subtle energy shift upward. We're subtle energy beings, so we're affected by that. So all the things that don't resonate with this new elevated place are coming up for review. And we see it globally. COVID was the
Mm,
example of the, global wake-up call. Now what's happening in the Middle East is, okay, we've dealt with these naysayers and the guys that don't want to play fair, and it's to a point now where we just have to do something about it. We can no longer just talk about it. We have
mm,
to
mm.
do something about it, and it's going to cause challenges for many in the process. But in order to move things forward, certain things have to happen. And unfortunately, there's certain people, places, and things involved that have to precipitate that.
But like I said, there is no profound transformation or growth that I have experienced that hasn't come through pain of some sort. But pain does not need to be bad. It can be reframed. When I go to the
Absolutely.
gym, which I love, right? I if I didn't feel resistance, well, what am I doing there? I
Sure.
actually enjoy the feeling of the resistance because I enjoy the growth. The
Right.
issue is that with a gym, I like people. Yeah, I know that if I work out, I will achieve a goal that will probably look like this.
Hmm.
When it comes to other forms of transformation where we don't know the outcome, where we have to be comfortable with the unknown,
Right.
that's where we freak out. That's where
Sure.
it's painful because we're trying to hold on.
It's like,
right?
oh
But
no,
we have,
no, help
but in
me,
being able
Mr.
to,
Wizard.
but letting go and just being like, oh, this is actually quite nice. Like what's
Yeah,
going on? That's exciting. Oh, I
certainly
wonder what will
freeing.
happen over there. Oh, like learning to let go, probably the most profound spiritual practice. There's letting go is everything. It's absolutely key. Surrender. Yeah,
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Quinn, this amazing conversation. Love it.
fun, brother.
We went a lot of places, and I really appreciate your expertise and honor the process that you had to go through to get it, like we all do. Um,
Listen, I am in awe of you and the path that, I've been, blazing this trail for 4 years. You've been doing it for 45. I mean, you've been out there on the frontier. It's like, doesn't
it doesn't
even
feel like it because I'm usually
compare.
by myself, right?
Yeah, well, I'm joining the party, and there are many others. So, thank you for keeping the flame burning.
Oh, you're welcome. And the thing about it, when you love yourself, you can have fun by yourself.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to learn that too. Perhaps that's another story.
Yeah. What advice would you give to others that are in the throes of this process in their own life that they can apply on a moment to moment or daily basis?
Hmm. The only thing in my life that I've ever found that however much of it I have, it's enough, but I could always have more, is my spiritual growth. It's the only thing, that I've ever found that pursuing, seeking, like spirituality doesn't need, it's not, again, it's not about religion, it's not about beliefs. It's about that feeling of surrender, that feeling of faith, that feeling of being a part of, and just pursuing it. It's everything. Like everything else is impermanent. Everything else will change whether I like it or not. But as I pursue that, it leads me on all of the adventures because what's at its core is love,
Hmm.
right? So taking that feeling and following it wherever it goes. If it takes you to a Hindu temple, wonderful. If it takes you to, the Earth Mission Command, amazing. If it takes you into Catholicism, like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. It takes you to Jesus Christ, great, right? It does, as long as that's like the intentions are pure,
Right.
just follow it.
Yep. I heard something the other day that was a wonderful suggestion and advice. I heard the other day, it's amazing what you can pick up when you're just listening, right? It's like being a cognitive scientist seeking truth in the intangible,
Hmm. Mm.
right?
Yeah, well, that's experience for me.
Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of ways to express it. And yours is quite heartwarming, unique in your way, and so profound in the effects that it's having in the world with human hearing.
Yeah,
Really honor what you're doing, Quinn, and I look forward to watching and maybe even participating in the future. It'll be far out.
absolutely, absolutely, Zen. It's been a
Well, thank you
privilege.
so
Thank
much
you.
for showing up um, and just being you. That's profound in its own
It's
effect.
so fun.
Yeah, it
This is
is. It is. It is.
this is cool.
Thanks again. And namaste and in la catch. So thanks again for sticking with us. Do like, share, subscribe, comment. I will respond, and whoever my guest is will too as well, I'm sure. Please do so. It means a lot. It helps that next level of connection occur too. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.